Namaste. A very pleasant and cheerful morning to all. I, Dr. Rajashri, from SKN Sinhagar College of Engineering, Koti, Pandharpur, welcome you all on the sixth day of Navratri talk organized by Indology Foundation, Delhi, in collaboration with Sinhagar Institute, Pune, and SNDT University, Mumbai. Today is the sixth day of Navratri dedicated to Ma Katyayani, who is featured with 3 eyes and 4 hands, where she holds a sword in her one left hand and a lotus in another. The other 2 hands respectively show protection and var mudras. It is believed that one can recite this mantra to achieve divine blessings of Ma Katyayani. Katyayani Mahamaye Mahayoginyadhishwari Nandagopasutam Devipati me Kurute Namha. Folks, we all are so blessed today to hear one of the splendid daughters of India, a great personality, an eminent scholar, Honorable Dr. Bhavani Rao R. I'm very much pleased and it's my proud privilege to introduce Honorable Bhavani Ma'am in front of you. Honorable Professor Bhavani Rao R. is the director of Amachi Labs, the Human Computer Interaction Research and Development Center at Amrita Vishwa Vidyapitham and the Center of Gender Equality and Women's Empowerment. In addition to serving as director, she also holds the UNESCO Chair on Gender Equality and Women's Empowerment. Her work has been closely associated with the United Nations and the Government of India on several flagship projects. Amachi Labs pioneers research and development in technologies such as haptics, VR, AR, robotics, and automation towards skill development in the areas of TVET and 21st century skills. Technologies developed in the center are used to train women and young adults in 65 plus rural communities, as well as 9 PMKVY centers across the country. The focus of research at the Center for Gender Equality and Women's Empowerment, as well as the UNESCO chair, is on vulnerability mapping to inform design of optimal interventions that further the vision of women empowerment and gender equality. Building towards inclusive sustainable development, international projects under the Center for Women Empowerment and Gender Equality includes those funded by the UN and the government of Israel. We are having such a eminent personality with us today. We are so lucky, we are so blessed. Now I request Honorable Dr. Bhavani ma'am to please enlighten us by your thoughts. Please, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rajashri, for that wonderful introduction and for welcoming me to this program. I would also like to thank the founder of the Indology Foundation, Mr. Lalit Mishra ji, also from the Singer Institute in Pune, Professor Nawale, and the Vice Chancellor of the SNDT Women's University in Mumbai, Professor Shashikala Vanjai. Thank you so much for organizing such a wonderful program and for inviting me to be a part of such a wonderful program at such an auspicious time. And special thanks to Ms. Vaishali for finding me and bringing me on board. So thank you, everyone. And a very good morning to the hosts of the program. Very good morning to everybody in the audience listening today this morning. My talk, as my title mentions, I'm going to try and associate the principles of sustainability to the qualities of motherhood. So I'm going to try and make a case that the core of sustainability principles are the qualities of motherhood. And motherhood stands at the core of our relationships with each other and with the environment. And based on our approaches, based on how we approach uh, our approaches can be designed along the principles of motherhood to make sure that we effectively address sustainable development issue and thereby attain the sustainable development goals declared by the United Nations. Much of what I'm going to speak to you today comes from the talks given by our Chancellor, Mata Shri Amritanandamayi Devi, and she has given talks on several very important occasions. The first and the one that I'm going to draw the most from is in 2002 when Amma introduced the concept of universal motherhood when she accepted the Gandhi King Award for Peace at the United Nations in Geneva. The second talk of hers that I'm going to draw on is the talk that she gave at the United Nations in New York in 2015. This is the inaugural session of the United Nations Academic Impact Program. And there's a second one. There's a third talk that I will also touch upon, is the talk that Amma gave at the Vatican, where she signed the declaration to end human trafficking. And this was done along with the current Pope in the year 2014. These three speeches and the work that we have been doing as a part of Amachi Labs and the Center for Women Empowerment and Gender Equality at Amrita University, these are the main areas on which I will be drawing on my learnings and my work in these places is what form some of the basis of the thoughts that I will present in front of you today during this talk. So let me start with what exactly are the SDGs and why is it so important to us and why is it that we should be thinking about the SDGs. And so the SDGs stand for the Sustainable Development Goals. There are 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and these were born at the United Nations Conference for Sustainable Development in Rio, in Brazil, in the year 2012. And the objective of these goals was to produce a universal set of goals for the entire world so that we can meet our most pressing challenges that are related to the environment, related to the political situation, and related to the economic challenges that the world is facing. They're very bold because they try to address all the challenges the world faces. There are 17 interconnected goals, which means you cannot achieve any one goal without achieving all the other goals. So they're very interdependent. They deal with threats like climate change, the state of our fragile natural resources, but they also talk about achieving gender equality, eradicating poverty, fostering peace. And I think they are a way where they kind of are unique in the sense because they cover so many elements that and facets that touch our life, but also a confirmation that the entire international community has made to end poverty everywhere. And the tagline of the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations is that to make sure that no one is left behind. The most important and overarching goal is to end poverty in all its forms, and their commitment is to make sure that no one is left behind. So this is the background of the Sustainable Development Goals, or the background, something that is so important to our time. This is what I'm going to talk about, but I'm going to talk about, can we bring a unique perspective on how we can achieve a mindset and an approach that basically you can take to addressing any and all of the goals together. So when we're talking about the most important goals of the SDGs, that to remove poverty of all kinds, multidimensional poverty permanently everywhere, it reminds me of one of Amma's quotes. This is the quote that I draw from the United Nations Academic Impact speech, that there are two kinds of poverty. Actually, I think maybe Amma even said this she talked about it in Barcelona much earlier. again at a United Nations gathering. So Amma said there are two kinds of poverty. She says this one is the poverty of lack of food and clothing and shelter, and the second kind of poverty is the poverty of lack of love and compassion. And she said if you tackle the second kind of poverty first, which is the poverty of lack of love and compassion, we automatically address the first kind of poverty, which is the poverty of lack of food and clothing and shelter. What am I saying is that if anybody with compassion and love in their hearts will automatically make sure that nobody else is suffering and will make a direct commitment to do something for somebody. So you tackle the first kind of poverty through the second by addressing the second kind of poverty first, is to awaken that love and compassion in people. And these qualities of like love and compassion, empathy, tolerance, patience, these are the quality of what Amma defines are the qualities of motherhood. And this again comes from the talk that Amma gave in Geneva in 2009 at the United Nations. So Amma really emphasizes on these qualities. And when you think about motherhood, when you say these are the qualities of motherhood, and motherhood, as we understand it, as we know it, is the capacity to conceive, to give birth, and to raise a youngster to maturity. But it's a little bit more beautiful than it's the capacity. If you make it one layer of an abstraction, it's the capacity to receive and to create something beautiful from what one has received. It is also the capacity to perpetuate, and it has the capacity to nurture. And these are all also within that capacity to conceive, give birth, and raise a youngster to maturity. If you abstract it, it's the capacity to receive, create something beautiful from what you have received, to capacity to perpetuate, and the capacity to nurture. And if you think about it, these are all the same foundational principles to sustainability and sustainable development. This is one aspect of what motherhood is about. If you think at the second layer of abstraction, motherhood is also the capacity to see anything as part of oneself. Everything is a part of oneself and not as separate. And this is indeed manifest Advaita, non-dualistic. It's the closest thing that comes to Advaita, is when you see something as a part of oneself. And if you really now look back, now you bring this very abstract element back into SDG language, they talk about leaving no one behind. So how do you leave no one behind? Is one way is to see everything as a part of oneself. And so this motherhood is the capacity of a mother not to see the child as separate from itself, but a part of itself. And the capacity of the philosophy of motherhood is to be able to see everything as a part of you and not separate from you, is one sure way of getting to the attitude of leaving no one behind. How do you get to the point of leaving no one behind if you don't start from actually situating yourself in a position where you see see everything and acknowledge everything and understand that, and then make sure that no one is left behind. And when something is a part of yourself and you do not see it as other, then you don't treat it as a commodity. You treat it with love and respect because it is a part of you. You don't deliberately hurt yourself. You take care of yourself if a part of you is wounded. If your hand is wounded, automatically, Amma says, the other hand will go to help this hand or will try and ease the pain in the other hand. It's like that when you see something as a part of yourself, you don't make it a commodity and you treat it with love and respect. And you do whatever you can to keep it healthy and happy. So when you see, like, for instance, the environment as part of yourself, then you don't exploit and you don't defile it, but you treat it with love and respect. If you see a woman or a child as a part of yourself, then you do not defile a child or exploit a child, but you treat it with love and respect. And here I will draw from a story that Amma talked about at the Vatican. Amma's mother, Damayanti Amma, taught Amma a lot of these very valuable lessons. So Amma says that when she was a child, they would go to the nearby river, which is the backwaters actually, and they would have a bath over there. And then when Amma would go for her bath, Damayanti Amma would tell her, You do not pee in a river because river is the goddess and it's sacred, and you do not defile it. So Amma says that when you learn to love and respect any natural resource or anything, then you automatically do not defile it and you do not exploit it. This is the same thing as when you see something as either divine or as a part of yourself, then you give it the respect that it deserves. And herein lies the key to reduced inequalities. Whether you're talking about the environment, whether you're talking about climate change, you're talking about the forests, you're talking about the oceans, if you're talking about peace and conflict resolution, you're talking about religions, you're talking about partnerships between people, you're talking about gender equality, you talk about any one of the SDGs. I told you there are 17 SDGs. I didn't want to list all of them out, but most of the topics that I just mentioned are all part of the SDGs. You can please look up the United Nations official website to have a list of all the SDGs. All these interrelated SDGs and all the inequalities that underlie these SDGs, if you approached it with this aspect of love and respect, and you don't treat it as something that is different from you, and when you don't treat it as love, when you approach it with the principle of motherhood, then automatically you're able to reduce these inequalities and you're able to deal with the conflicts that are there and the issues that are there. Uh, that, that the sustainable goals are trying to address. When you think about motherhood, it's not only about women. It's not limited to biology, but it is an expression of these qualities that Amma listed out: the qualities of love and compassion, patience, tolerance, respect. These are the qualities that form motherhood. And yes, one may say that motherhood manifests more easily in women than in men because they give birth. But Amma says that there is a man in every woman and a woman in every man. This is actually reflected very beautifully also in our ancient, very iconic Ardhanarishwara. The truly balanced human is the human that basically balances their feminine side with their masculine side. So there is that quality of motherhood that is latent in every woman and every man that must be awakened and that can be awakened. And therefore, while it is not something that is exclusive to women, it can manifest itself far easier in women than in men because of just the fact that they give birth to children and then they look after and they nurture the children, and therefore it becomes easier. But it's not a general rule, and I don't want to bracket. There are some men who are equally compassionate or more so even. And it's also important to bear in mind that these qualities of motherhood, compassion, love, empathy, tolerance, they're not a weakness and they should be treated as weakness or never be understood as weakness. Actually, the qualities of motherhood, it's powerful. It is power, but it's pure power. It's what Amma says is this power of motherhood is pure power. Without the motherhood principles, without love and without compassion, power becomes corrupt. And when there is power without the principles of motherhood, it only exacerbates divisions and inequalities and disruption. So, what do we mean when we talk about the power of motherhood? I think this may be best captured in one of the mantras of the Lalita Sahasranama, Om Ichha Shakti, Jnana Shakti, Kriya Shakti, Swarupini. And the three powers of the Divine Mother are reflected as Ichha Shakti, Jnana Shakti, and Kriya Shakti. And I will explain to you what these three powers are. I'm sure most of you already know about it, but I will just explain. So Ichha Shakti is the power of intention. It's the Ichha, it's your will, it's the power of intention. And that power of intention, it's what in social sciences some of the academic scholars will probably refer to as the mental space of a person. It is your capacity to act as your internal capacities. It's the power of intention. Now, this power of intention must be, when it's based in motherhood, it becomes pure and it becomes rooted in compassion. And so Ichha Shakti, the intention or the power of intention that is rooted in compassion, is Ichha Shakti. Jnana Shakti is the power of knowledge. And when your intention is rooted in compassion, it gives you the power of knowledge in a very different level. It gives you empathetic knowledge. You are able to see the other as yourself, so you are able to understand the needs of a person better because you're empathetic with that person's situation. If a person is from a different culture, from a different religion, from a different socioeconomic background, but you see that person not as different as yourself, you're able to empathetically understand what that person's needs are. And that's the power of empathetic knowledge. But also, Jnana Shakti is the power of scientific knowledge. It's the rigorous knowledge that is born from facts. Alone, empathetic knowledge can take you so far, and alone, scientific knowledge can take you so far. But when you combine the two, it's the power of motherhood. You know the facts and you understand it from a place of your heart. The combined knowledge is Jnana Shakti, is the power of knowledge which combines both the scientific knowledge and the empathetic knowledge. And this is the Jnana Shakti. The third power is Kriya Shakti, is the power of action. When you are rooted, your motivation and your intent is driven by compassion, and you are now you work with the forces of knowledge, both of scientific fact and empathetic understanding of what the needs are, and you translate it into action. The action manifests itself for the benefit of all. The action's intention, because it's driven by compassion and by knowledge, is for the benefit of all. It is for uh, uh, auspicious and yeah, the greater good. And at the same time, it is an action that is done without any expectation. It's nishkama karma. It is altruistic in nature. So it is done like a typical mother will do something for her children without any expectations. So when you have the Kriya Shakti is basically that kind of action that is for the benefit of for the greater good of all, and that is altruistic without expecting anything in return. These three forms of Shakti, the Ichha Shakti, Jnana Shakti, Kriya Shakti, these three forms of power becomes the power of motherhood. And these are that's why it's actually a very powerful force. And we need these qualities and the power of motherhood combined together to make this world a much better place. Uh, and just off on the side, I mean, if you look at the current situation of COVID and you look at the world, and it's very interesting to see that there have been repeated articles in the newspapers, and I'm sure you're following these things about how during COVID, certain women national leaders, whether it's the Prime Minister of New Zealand, Ms. Jacinda Ardern, or the Chancellor of Germany, Angela Merkel, these are all women leaders, the Prime Minister of Finland. There are women leaders across the world that have done a much better job of controlling the COVID pandemic within their countries than their male counterparts. This is taking into account what their country population is, what is their economic growth, considering everything and normalizing for everything. They still have shown that these women have made a much better attempt at dealing with the situation than their male counterparts across the world. And there's a question that comes up, and this has come up in several articles. Is it the motherhood instinct of these women leaders that made them deal with the situation in the kind of urgency and the kind of they gave it the kind of urgency and importance that they would? Was it the motherhood instinct that and I remember reading this and I was thinking, yes, I mean, whoever has made this connection is spot on. It's the power of motherhood. And while this is not being verified academically, I'm just putting it out as a thought for you to just contemplate on. Now, let me share with you now how this power of motherhood has shaped my life and impacted the work that I do here at the university. And now I think I mentioned that Amma is our chancellor at the very beginning of the talk. But Amma is also a spiritual leader, and I think almost everybody in India has heard of her. Mata Amritanandamayi Devi. She's based in Kerala, but she travels to Mumbai and Maharashtra very frequently, almost every year, except for this year during the pandemic. Um, Amma, in her essence, embodies the principles not just of motherhood but of universal motherhood. To her, all of creation are her children. She sees the world and everybody as her child, whether it's an animal or a plant or a human, and whether it's from India or any other country in the world. And she expresses this through her world famous hugs, where she embraces everybody who comes to her, and she sits tirelessly for hours, giving that love and compassion and that attention to each person as if they were her own child, not as if because they are her own child. And this is the power of her love and compassion basically built up the entire Amrita institutions that you have now. And and remember the first point I made about how when you address the second kind of poverty, the poverty of love and compassion, you automatically address the first kind of poverty. So what Amma has done through her transformational embraces and her love is basically ignite that same principle of motherhood and awaken that principle of motherhood within all of us who work at the Amrita institutions and basically anybody who she's touched in her life. And this awakening helps us then work towards the needs of those who are underserved, to work with people who are afflicted by the first kind of poverty, and indeed multi-dimensional poverty in all its dimensions. And this is the multiplier effect of Amma's love and compassion, and how she, while she is also working on helping the underserved, she now has touched upon millions of people across the world to do the same kind of work that she is doing. It's igniting that power of motherhood and that those principles of motherhood within each one of us. So now I will, inspired by Amma, guided by Amma, my works at the university started in 2009 at Amrita University when we first started the Yamachi Labs, and then later the Center for Women Empowerment and Gender Equality. This was started by Amma, guided by Amma, and based on the principles of motherhood as envisioned by Amma. Under the guidance of Amma, we have been working with women in rural India. Now, when you talk about why women, because women are the caretakers of all the vulnerable populations. They look after the children, they look after the elderly, they look after the disabled, they look after the men folk. They look after cattle, they look after the other livestock, they look after the fields, they look after all the natural resources. So they're also the first teachers, the Adi Guru. So when you work with women, you're basically working in all these areas, and that's why actually going back to the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goal 5 is the goal to gender equality, and its main focus is on women's empowerment. But this topic of women's empowerment is not limited to SDG 5. It is actually cuts across all the sustainable development themes because the whole world recognizes that when you work with women, you automatically tackle all the problems and all the issues in this world. And therefore, it's something that cuts across, and it's also the reason why we don't work only with women, but predominantly we work with women. So Amas has started several activities that are around women's empowerment. Most notably, and probably the biggest one that should be mentioned is the Amrita Shri program. Amma has financed from 2004, financed and nurtured a growing movement of 250,000 women in self-help groups across Kerala, Tamil Nadu, and 21 states of the country. Uh, these women have been so empowered now. They are helping the other women in their community by building houses for them, by providing education funds for their children to study, for paying for surgeries, remarkable service activities that are conducted now by the Amrita Shri movement which is it is phenomenal. Apart from that, there's also some very significant. I cannot list everything that Amma does because there's just too many, but I'm just highlighting. Amma also started a whole lineage of women who perform pujas in temples. They're the main priests, and she has trained over 300 uh, women priests that conduct rituals and homas and yajnas across India. Um, and it's actually, I'm sure there are some very beautiful online videos that you could see where all women are performing these very sacred ceremonies, and that's another thing. But in coming down to the work that we do, we've been working in skill development. Again, this is in 21 states and across 101 communities that AMA has adopted across India. Um, uh, we have worked on not just in skill development, we've worked with women in community mobilization towards larger sustainable development goals like clean water and access to sanitation, contributing towards the Swachh Bharat program. We've trained women in accessing government schemes to make sure that all their basic needs are covered for. Also created women change agents in all the communities that we have worked in. But it's not just also the work that we have done in the field, it's also about transforming ourselves as people and be able to invoke those qualities of motherhood within ourselves. And I've shared two quick short stories with you about our experiences in the field with respect to motherhood. There's two young men who are from our lab, and they were sent to Himachal Pradesh to start the work in the villages in Himachal Pradesh. And when they went to the villages, they found that even though there was a whole discussion on starting to work and to doing things at the village, and there was general approval, we we found it that it was very very hard to connect with the people in the village. They did not trust us because so many NGOs had come and gone and had not done anything tangible over there. So there was complete distrust. Um, the place was there was no sanitation and there were no toilets, and it was probably one of the most difficult places for somebody from the urban area to go to in terms of sanitation issues. And I remember these two young men went there, and part of the thing was that to first to talk to the community and to get a group of 9 to 10 women who would be interested in skill development practices and to interested in bringing sanitation practices into their homes, and then start to work with those women. And when they went, there was not a single person who was willing to talk to them, not a single person who was willing to address the issue. So they came from a point, so they reflected, so they had a choice to either to go back because there was nothing could be done, or what should they do. So they reflected on Amma's words on love and compassion and on patience and on forbearance. And so holding these values in their hearts, they said they found one lady who was interested in sanitation. And they said, okay, we will build a toilet for you. And two of them, there was no labor help, nothing, but two of them worked day in and day out to just build a toilet for this woman in the village. And then slowly people started wondering, why would somebody do something for them with nothing? These are engineers and people who finish their MBA, they're very highly qualified young men. Why are they coming and digging pits in our village? And slowly they saw the hard work and they saw the love, they saw the compassion, and they saw the patience and forbearance of these two young men. And soon enough, by one, different people from the village came and started helping. And soon there was a whole mobilization of a whole group of women who started to learn how to build the toilets and build toilets in their own villages. And to date, they send back greetings to these two young men, and they always have tears in their eyes and say that your love and your compassion opened our hardened hearts. And this is a very beautiful story of how love and compassion made breakthroughs and made such wonderful changes in a community. I will share another story of another very strong person from our group who she's the head of the village coordination. She's a remarkable person, and she was traveling alone with another colleague, but she was the only woman into the villages in Chhattisgarh. And so, of course, everybody told her, "Oh, these are Maoist areas. You have to be careful. People are dangerous." But she had the faith of, and she lives the philosophy of motherhood very, very strongly, and she's a very strong woman in that sense. And so so there were men who came and asked her, "Why are you here? What are you doing here?" Men who were drunk, uh, but with every one of them, she spoke to them. She dealt with that entire community, rooted in the principles of motherhood, in love and in compassion, not in distrust, but in trust, uh, in compassion. And she basically turned that entire community around to have so much of respect for her. Even now, when she goes to Orissa and Chhattisgarh, they treat her as she's one of their family because she treated them as their own, as her own. And these are the kind of bonds that have been built through the power, through embodying the principles of motherhood in our actions. And the kind of change is always slow; it's never instant. But the bonds are strong and everlasting, and through these bonds, we slowly work these changes. Um, and these are just some of the incidents of the work that we do that I was sharing with you. I also have a couple of short videos that I would like to share you to give you a better idea of what the lab does and how it goes about achieving the work it does. And I think I do have a little bit of time because I think we end the talk at 10:45, and I think I have just about time to show you those videos. So if it's okay, I'm going to do a screen share, and I will play these two videos for you. Um, just hang on. So I'll first share with you the video of the Center for Women Empowerment and Gender Equality, and then I will share with you the video on Amachi Labs. Please let me know if you can hear. Our vision of gender equality is inspired by our Chancellor's words. Women and men are of equal value, like two wings of a bird, for without the two in perfect harmony, humanity cannot progress. We hold India's only UNESCO chair in the area of gender equality and women's empowerment. Our research goal is to further women's empowerment and gender equality as a community agenda in harmony with the environment towards a sustainable future. While addressing problems in villages, we work with women to identify what vulnerabilities they have and co-design interventions with them. One of which we're really proud of is addressing the need for toilets. We taught women to build and maintain their own toilet, and after they mastered these skills, they mobilized the community towards ending open defecation. Some now earn a living by building toilets for others in the village. It's a win-win situation. It's a community-led total sanitation approach. Some of our women leaders were even honored by the President of India for their efforts towards ending open defecation. This was a huge achievement and a source of inspiration for all. We integrate life skills throughout our training programs. To us, it is as important, if not more, than vocational skills. These trainings strengthen the socio-democratic voice and economic empowerment of women. It expands the collective empowerment space of women. I will be playing another short video. This is the video on the work that we do here at Amachi Labs. And yeah.
The Machi Lab is the most creative way of empowering women of all of the projects which the UN funds around the world. This is the one dearest to our heart. It's the one we're most proud of, and it's the one that we intend to take to the rest of the world so that they can learn from what you have achieved.
The one critical way to survive in a changing environment is to make sure that you have the skills to survive in a changing environment. So we need to either continuously update our skills or acquire new skills to survive in this kind of an environment. We are a multidisciplinary group of close to 100 people. We have engineers, artists, artisans, videographers, social scientists, field workers, volunteers, and exchange students from around the globe, and all working to understand India's complex social problems and together build solutions. With vocational skills training, there's a huge component that you have to do with your hands. So how do you teach something with your hands by using technology?
Our methodology is the CVET methodology. It stands for Computerized Vocational Education and Training. It's a blended learning approach for vocational and life skills. Till date, we have developed over 15 vocational courses and 20 life skills courses, and we have used it to train rural women and children across 21 states of India.
You can't throw technology at difficult social situations and expect it to get better. You have to take it there. You have to work very sensitively to see how it's going to fit into people's lives.
They spend their time in the villages along with our end users to really understand their issues from a place of empathy and of connection. We have had a lot of firsts. We have trained India's first women plumbers. We have built the first haptic simulator in the country. We have had tribal women launch Kickstarter campaigns to fund their businesses. We taught women to build and maintain their own toilet, mobilized the community towards ending open defecation. Some now earn a living by building toilets for others in the village.
आपने शौचालय के निर्माण के लिए जो बहनों को मिस्त्री का काम सिखाने का अभियान चलाया है, वो सचमुच में ह्यूमन रिसोर्स डेवलपमेंट, स्किल डेवलपमेंट का एक बहुत बड़ा काम है। बहनें और बेटियां स्वच्छता के दूत तो पहले से ही थे, अब आपने स्किल और सशक्तिकरण को भी इससे जोड़ा है।
All this could not have happened were it not for the guidance, the vision, and the opportunity given by our Chancellor, Sri Mata Amritanandamayi Devi. Yes. So there is an interesting point that I would like to make. Even when you're designing technology, you can keep the principles of motherhood in your heart, because when you're designing technology for people, you have to be able to understand them. Like it is said in the video, you should be able to understand their needs and you should be able to design for their needs. And that requires some level of empathy and understanding of people's needs. And so even in terms of designing technologies towards sustainable development, because you're not only designing technology for consumerism and consumption, and it's not based on commodities, it's based on sustainability. So if you want to build even technologies for sustainable development, you may want to keep the principles of motherhood as the basis for that. And so with this, I would like to, I think, end my talk with a prayer, which is probably going to be the most quoted prayer for this 9 days, is Ya Devi Sarvabhuteshu Matrurupena Samstita Namaste. Thank you, Amma. Thank you, group there. Thank you, everybody, for this wonderful opportunity.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thanks a lot for your glorious thoughts that gleamed us with enthusiasm and new hopes to look forward. Your thoughts and efforts are way to live a very proud, empowered, and sustainable life to women.
Rashmi ma'am, your voice is not coming. Very thanks audience and Bhavani Rao madam, you just enlightened us with all the works. And I request audience to please join us today evening session. In today's evening session, Dr. Amrit speaking on women archaeologists of India and abroad. Also listen Dr. Abha Mishra Patak madam. Madam.